The Syrian army continues with an all-out offensive to dislodge foreign-backed terrorists from the southern province of Daraa. The UK-based war monitoring group says the government forces launched a deadly airstrike on areas held by Nusra Front terrorists on Wednesday. The group says that rockets and barrel bombs particularly hit the Balad neighborhood. There is no word on possible casualties so far. According to Syrian sources, more than 450 militants also surrendered to the army in the Dara'a countryside. Meanwhile, Nusra Front terrorists have attacked a power plant in a village in Dara'a, causing blackouts in the area. The southern province is the main stronghold of the terrorists. Syria has been fighting different foreign-sponsored terror groups since March 2011. Mohammed Ali is a correspondent joining us from Syria's capital, Damascus. So tell us, at what stage of this operation are we at? What are we looking at in terms of the progress made by the Syrian army?
Yes, we are still at the first stage of the military operations of this wide offensive launched by the Syrian army against the terrorists of the al-Nusra Front in the southern part of Syria, particularly in the cities of Dara'a and al-Zawr, in addition to their countryside, of course. The latest developments there was that, according to the central media center of the Lebanese resistance movement Hezbollah, the Syrian army was able to take control of 3 new towns and villages in the eastern countryside of Dara'a, namely Nahte, eastern Mleha and western Mleha over there, following ferocious fighting with the al-Nusra Front terrorists in that area. There are also reports coming out, fresh reports, that the army is also taking control currently as we speak of the areas of Al-Hrak, Samma, Al-Hnedat and Al-Smea. All of those are villages in the eastern countryside of the city of Daraa. Of course, yesterday was the first official day of the military offensive of the Syrian army against the terrorists inside the city of Daraa itself, not only the countryside, in which the army started striking the terrorist positions in the areas of Dara'a al-Balad and today in the area of al-Jumrak al-Qadim, which are on the southeastern part of Dara'a city itself. What the army is trying to do is to cut the supply lines of the terrorists that link those areas in southeast Dara'a with the borderline between Syria and Jordan. This is a supply line that terrorists have been using for years over there, and this is the aim of the first stage of the military operation. In the meantime, there are residents of many towns and villages, mainly Ibta' Da'il and Al-Gharia al-Sharqiyya, who have come out and from their houses and took to the streets, raising and holding the Syrian flag, calling on the Syrian army to enter and eliminate the terrorist groups inside. Also, the terrorists have been shelling areas in Daraa, residential government-held areas, with mortar shells in retaliation. One woman was also injured as a result in al-Sahari quarter. So the Syrian army seems to be serious about eliminating the al-Nusra Front seriously from the southern part of Syria. There are military operations happening both in the countryside of al-Sweda and in the countryside of Daraa and in the city itself. And finally, it is important to point out that 1,000 individuals surrendered themselves to the Syrian army and security forces. There were about 280 out of those 1,000 who were armed men who surrendered their weapons. They have also settled their legal status quo, their situation, and returned to normal life. The rest were wanted individuals and people who actually ran away previously from the military service, military duty in Syria.
Thank you so much for that. Mohammed Ali, correspondent there from Damascus.
Joining us live now from Hamilton is Mr. Ken Stone, who is with the Hamilton Coalition to Stop the War. Ken, as always, thanks for joining us. How important, Ken, do you think this war on terror, specifically in Syria, is that the Syrian Arab Army is waging?
I think that the Syrian Arab Army deserves high praise and congratulations for liberating that huge territory of 5,800 square kilometers of desert in the province of Deir az-Zor from Daesh or ISIS, because Daesh or ISIS is a proxy force, a proxy army for the U.S. and also for Israel. And these proxy armies, their role is to achieve regime change in Syria. And this is another example of the Syrian Arab Army foiling the plans of the superpower, the USA, backed up by many NATO allies, including, unfortunately, Canada, and bankrolled by the Arab monarchies. So this has been a long process, and now in its 8th year, and very few countries in the world can say what the Syrian Arab government and the army can say is that we have stood up against the world's superpower, backed by the strongest coalition in the history of the world, and we have turned them back. We have liberated areas held by these proxy armies, and now, with this particular piece of territory liberated, the Syrian Arab Army can now move forward against the U.S. forces, which are illegally occupying a whole 1/3 of Syria on the eastern side of the Euphrates, where Syria's some of its best land is, the source of its water, and also its petrochemical industry. So it's an important victory, and it's it could only happen as all the other victories that we've seen, Aleppo, Douma, and so on, by the Syrian army, because the Syrian government has popular support, has the support of the Syrian people, and it has powerful allies and friends in the countries such as Iran, Russia, China, Hezbollah in Lebanon, and the help of many Palestinian militias. So the point of it is that the Syrian government is going eventually to liberate all of its territory and to regain its national sovereignty, and it's a good indication that it will not only do all that, but it will also be able to reconstruct the country. And here's where people in the West have a role to play, people in the peace movements in the West. The reconstruction of Syria will not happen easily if sanctions which were leveled illegally against Syria are not lifted. These sanctions were organized in Canada under the Harper government in June 2013, and they have created millions of refugees who have been forced to leave Syria because they couldn't feed their families. So these economic sanctions have to end. This is a demand we have to raise, and governments in the West need now to start reestablishing ties, full diplomatic relations with Syria, so once the war is over, the reconstruction can also begin.
Very well, Ken, we'll leave there at that, but of course, as always, we appreciate you taking your time out to speak to us.